I have read over 800 books on this channel, and I thought it would be fun to do a video about my ultimate best recommendations. So whenever I recommend this book to someone, 99% chance you will also like it. And I tried to stick to one per genre, which was really hard. I will be linking in the description box other recommendation videos because some of them are well known, so you might want some more underrated ones. But some of these I just think they deserve more hype, so I will be pushing them until all of you rate them. So let's get to it. Let's start with classics. Specifically, the first category is modern classic, and I wanted to rave about Flowers for Algernon, which super well-known book. I somehow managed to spend my whole life never hearing any spoilers, which was amazing. And I'm here to tell you it is absolutely worth the hype. So if you haven't read it, you're following this main character, Charlie, who has a low IQ, and he ends up participating into this experiment that will increase his IQ, and you're following his journey through journal entries, which, not gonna lie, at first it was kind of difficult to understand because English is not my first language, but you're kind of just seeing him improving throughout the book. And all I knew is that it was about a mouse, which the mouse also go through the same experiment. And it is really interesting to see how it affects him, the people around him, the relationship he has with these people, and just seeing him improve throughout the book. And a very emotional book. I do not understand why some of you had to read that in middle school. Like, your teachers were so mean, because this will make you want to cry. It was a very intense book. Definitely something that I also want to reread, which I don't reread books as often as I used to, and this I will make the time for it because fantastic book. I can definitely see this continuing to be a classic forever. This is just really, really good. I loved it. And for the classic category, I wanted to mention The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I think she's my favorite Bronte sister. I feel like she's underrated compared to her sisters, and this was great. Even if it is an older book, I think that even from a modern lens, it survives the test of time. You're following this woman who appears in this neighborhood with a child, and it's very mysterious. People don't really know where she's from, what happened, and this man basically falls in love with her and is really focusing on trying to figure out what happened. And you're following the story. Fantastic. At the time, it was quite controversial to the point that whenever the author passed away, her sister refused for it to be republished. And I think maybe that's the reason that it feels quite modern, except the ending. But if you're looking for a new classic to pick up, I would definitely recommend this one. I really, really enjoyed it. Let's go with mystery thriller horror books. Thriller. I have to give it to this one. It was really hard to choose just one, but Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This is what I've been calling a dad recommendation. It really reads like an action movie in a good way. You're following these two men, these two fathers who have not been good fathers. They have a rough past, both of them, and they team up to try and solve the murder. Both of their sons that were married together were murdered, and the police didn't really do much. So they take it into their own ends and try to figure out what happened, get revenge. And like I said, very pew-pew, beating up people, but it was surprisingly emotional. You end up really rooting for them because they're morally gray, but you just fall in love with them and really want them to succeed. And yeah, could not put it down. I mean, thrillers, they tend to do that, the good ones at least, but I've been recommending this ever since I've read it, and a lot of you have told me that you also really loved it. So if you want a new thriller, check out this one. Mystery. Okay, choosing one is also difficult, but this one is popular, and I understand the hype. And if you have yet to pick it up, I would recommend checking out The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I think this is just such a solid recommendation. My edition obviously is humongous because it's a mass market paperback, but once the story gets started, I just could not put it down, and I need to know what was going to happen because you're following this financial journalist that ends up being hired by this rich man to solve a disappearance, possible murder mystery that happened within his family. So they were having this party, family island, and someone disappeared and the body was never found, and he obviously wants to figure out what happened before he passes away because he doesn't want to leave his fortune to someone that is responsible. So he goes on this little mission over there trying to figure out what happened. A lot of intrigue, like family drama, but more like political intrigue. It becomes this big thing, and yeah, I couldn't put it down. I really wanted to figure out what happened. You do get a proper answer, even though this is the first book in a series. I personally would recommend even reading it as a standalone. I didn't care for the rest of the series. I did read it, but this is the best one in my opinion, and it is absolutely worth the hype. It was nothing like I expected. There were some difficult topics that are mentioned in here, but I do think they were well handled, and yeah, I really loved it. I understand why it's so popular. Horror is not one of my main genres. I haven't read as many, so the best one that I have read that I would recommend checking out is Sour Candy, which is so small, and I mean so small. I can't tell you too much, again, because of the size. The story starts with this man at the store, and there is this child that is just screaming for sour candy, and he just starts talking to this woman who looks extremely tired, and things progress very, very fast. And yeah, could also not put it down. Obviously, you can read this in one sitting, and I enjoyed it. I feel like horror, one of my main complaints is that you don't get a satisfying ending, or an ending. It's always left open, and I think it's so unsatisfying. Like, I need you to decide. Like, I don't care if it's aliens, ghost, whatever, just choose. Because when you leave it open, it makes me feel like you didn't know how to end it, and that's on you. Like, you're just not good. That's mean, but you know what I mean. So this one, you do get an answer. So yes, I would recommend Sour Candy. If you have any other recommendation for any categories, but let me know. I would recommend that one. Next is romance, also not my main genre. However, I feel like I've been enjoying it more and more now that I've discovered you can actually read some with like characters that are older and that are not just miscommunicating the whole time. So I had a really good time reading Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I also like Beach Read by her, but I think this is my number one, and that's the one that I've been recommending it the most, because not only is the story good, the romance is good, and I feel like you get actual complex side characters. Like, the story is not just about the romance, but you start with this woman who goes on one last trip with her sister. Her sister is basically pregnant with her third baby. So like, they want to take the time to go to this small town that is linked to a book that they like. And in this small town, they meet the man that she hates already. They both work in the publishing world, which she tends to do that. It works. I mean, who doesn't like to read books about people that read books? So there is this enemies to lovers going on. There is, again, the relationship with her family and just the other people from that small town. And I just really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for a good book, a good romance book. For contemporary, I decided to go with 10 minutes, 38 seconds in This Strange World. What a story. I picked it up because you guys were recommending it to me, and I found myself really emotionally invested. First chapter, the main character dies, and that's how the story starts. She is a prostitute. She's left for dead in a dumpster, and you're following her for 10 minutes and 38 seconds that her brain is still working, and you're getting the flashbacks of her life, how she grew up, what the circumstances that brought her to the point that she was at the end, and most importantly, the people that were important to her. And you're really getting invested in all of these stories, knowing how it ends, but it still hurt. And at the end, the last section, you're following those important people and seeing the effects of her deaths on them. And I love this. I love this. It really took me by surprise. The writing is more lyrical than what I usually go for, but this was great. I can't recommend this enough. Yes, fantastic. For historical fiction, I decided to go with My Brilliant Friend. I've raved about this series a lot, and I will continue to do so because this is amazing. I feel like it's more popular in Europe than here. It was originally written in Italian, so that may be the reason. But this is a 4-book series that you're following these two women throughout their whole life. You're following their friendship, the good moments, a lot of bad moments, and you see them trying to escape poverty, the small neighborhood they are in, and there's a lot of political events that are going on at the same time. But it's about everything that can happen in someone's life, the good, the bad, and the author really doesn't shy away from talking about tough subjects, and she does it in such a good way. I just cared about everyone in here. The main characters, but also the side ones. You're following them throughout their whole lives, everyone from that neighborhood. So you're really seeing the effects of their decisions and other people's decisions that affect them. And this is just fantastic, like a 5-star series. So good. It was refreshing for me to read a historical fiction that wasn't about World War II. So I need to read more of those. The next couple ones are absolutely my main genres. I've been trying to keep them for last because honestly it is so difficult to only choose one. I have done other videos recommending a bunch, so I will link those down below if you want more. But if I had to only choose one to make you read. For fantasy, listen, this was my best book of last year. Out of the 100 and something books, I did this tournament bracket to end up with one book to recommend to you, and it was Blood Over Bright Haven. This was originally self-published last year. It has been picked up by a publisher and it's coming out again in October. So I would recommend pre-ordering it because this is going to be your best book of the year. This is just so good. I cannot stop raving about it, and I will continue to do so until you all read it. If I could only make you read one fantasy book, this is the one I'm choosing right now. What I loved about this one is that first chapter, you're invested. You're following the remnant of this tribe that are trying to make a run for safety over this frozen lake, and a lot happens in that one chapter. it hurts. And then you get to the actual main story following this woman who has spent her whole life studying, trying to make it and to become a part of the High Magistrate. And she wants to do magical research basically for a living, and that's what's going to happen, you know, in the beginning. You get a little bit of Dark Academia vibes also, and the world building was really interesting. The author definitely uses that to make social commentaries, and you can't put it down. You're so emotionally invested. The ending hurt, as she tend to do. And yeah, I love it. It's a standalone fantasy, adult fantasy, which I feel like there aren't enough of them. And this is the one that you have to read now. So do it. I love sci-fi, and making me choose only one is cruel. It's just cruel. So again, I've done a lot of recommendation videos because I feel like as a genre it's underrated. I've done some that is like, if you like this genre, try this one. So check those out. But if I could only choose one to make people read, because I do think some of the ones might be more popular in general, but I love this author and she deserves more love. She is known, but I don't feel like enough people actually read her books. And it is Octavia E. Butler, specifically the book Kindred. This, in my opinion, is the best way to start reading her books. I'm planning on doing a whole video on that topic. I have 2 more of her books to read, and after that I will do that. But this is the way you should start, in my opinion. This is her most accessible book. She tends to write sci-fi, and they tend to be, the sci-fi elements are basically used to discuss important topics like racism, misogyny, and they're all different subgenres. This one is time travel. You're following this Black woman, I believe this is set in the 80s in California, and she's living her life when all of a sudden she's pulled back in time 150 years ago in the Deep South, and she is forced to try to survive slavery. And you don't really know what happened. She keeps going back and forth between the timelines. I don't want to tell you too much. It's quite easy to go through. It is very difficult emotionally, though. I think that there were so many different sections that I had to pause and just think about it. The fact that the main female character has more empathy for the enslavers than they would ever have for her. And she's mentioning at one point that she realizes how easy it is to feel forced to accept her circumstances. I thought I would include the first couple of lines of the book to really do it justice. So it starts by saying, "I lost an arm on my last trip home, my left arm, and I lost about a year of my life and much of the comfort and security I had not valued until it was gone." Tell me it doesn't make you want to pick up the book ASAP. Honestly, you just have to read it. You have to experience her books. And like I said, this is the easiest way to start, in my opinion. This was actually the first book that I also picked up, and it's a standalone. So like, you have no choice. I do feel like she's well known, but I feel like she could be even more popular. She deserves it. So good. I purposely added a category just to rave about this book. So that tells you everything. And we're doing speculative fiction, which I think is going to be one of my new favorite genres. So if you have any recommendations, let me know. But I've definitely raved about this book before. I definitely have. This was my best book of 2022. So I, who have never known men, this is fantastic. Another short book you will not be able to put down. I ended up rereading it right after I was done. I realized it had been written in French, so I bought it, I read it, and I loved it all over again 4 months later. You're following 40 women that are underground in a cage. They don't know why, they don't know what happened. And you're following the story through the eyes of the youngest one. She's so young that she doesn't even remember her life outside of that cage. And then one day something happens, the door is left open and they escape. And this book is not so much about finding, you know, what happened, finding the answers. It's definitely more an exploration of what it is to be human, of humanity, of what is left of us whenever we have nothing. I know a lot of you ended up picking it up and also enjoying it. I just love discussing what people think it is about, what they've actually absorbed from this book, and this is something that I will just keep rereading. Again, I've already reread it, and I can see myself rereading it every year or two for the rest of my life. It's just so impactful. I personally called it beautifully bleak. I know some people found it a little dark, but I do think that there is some hope underneath as part of the message, but just such a fantastic book. I loved it. If you want to put a book down and just stare at the wall for an hour, this is the book you need to pick up. Magical realism is probably my least favorite genre ever. It doesn't tend to work for me. And I feel like it might be debatable if this book is specifically magical realism, fantasy-ish, but we're going to include it in here. I do think it works. So one of my all-time favorite books that I do think you should pick up if you haven't is Piranesi. This is such a strange little book, as most magical realism books tend to be. It's really hard to describe and it's really hard to get into at first. I put it down after a couple pages the first time I tried it, and I was not going to pick it up again because... But it is worth pushing through. It doesn't even last super long. It's just that at first, the main narrator has no idea what's going on. This is why it's confusing. And eventually, not that far into the book, it starts making sense. So the main character is in this huge place. He doesn't know what's going on, what he's doing there, and he's having memory issues. So he's trying to figure out what happened. He will find notes that he has written and like trying to piece things together, explore the place. You do get a little bit of dark academia vibes also, if that's your thing. And they're piecing things together, trying to solve the mystery throughout the book, and it was fantastic. If I had heard this description, I probably would not have picked it up, and here I am giving you this recommendation because I gave it 5 stars. This was absolutely worth picking up. It's been getting hype and it totally deserves it. So if you like strange little books, if you like magical realism more than me, you need to. You probably have, but you need to. Next, we have nonfiction. I do think that there are other books I could have mentioned that are more well-known, well-loved, and more well-received than this one, but I personally think that this one deserves more hype. I really loved it, and I do think this is a really important topic that I wish more people read about, and it is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. In this book, the author did some deep research on misogyny, but specifically like the incel movement, for example, and every chapter explores a different subset of that. So we have men who hate women, we have men who prey on women, men who avoid women, so like incels, then pickup artists, and she goes through these categories, and it's obviously a very difficult topic to go into, but I do think she handled it really well. And I also appreciated that she tried to make this end on a hopeful note. The last chapter is Men Who Hate Women, and she talks about how she goes to do these speeches in schools and how the teachers there have tried to implement some of the things she is suggesting, and how obviously with misogyny, often, especially younger men, they will listen to other men more than a woman talking. So seeing the effects, the positive effect of these men actually starting to try to make this change is making you end the book on a happier note. But I really appreciated how she, throughout the book, also reversed some of the myths that are popular, because when you talk about this, less so I feel like nowadays, but at first, whenever people would talk about the incel movement, you would also hear that, oh, you know, it's just a small subset of the population. It's just online, it has no impact on real life. And she really goes through all of these points and proves that it's completely false. So a little bit difficult to read, absolutely, but I do think that this is absolutely worth picking up. So definitely wanted to recommend this one. This was fun, although a little difficult, limiting to one book, but let me know if you enjoyed this video. I am planning on doing one where I talk about the #1 worst book that I've read for each category. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. I'll link it in the description box also whenever it is up, and I will be putting more videos on the screen that I recommend you check out, and I will see you soon in my next one. Bye.